everybody. My name is Morgan, and you are on the We Are Worship USA Blab. I have a co-host with me today, Wisdom Moon. Say hey, Wisdom.
Hey, Wisdom.
Glad you guys could join us. We have some fun things in store today. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We have on our website, WeAreWorship.com, a few free things for you to grab. We have a free song of the week that is We Are Waiting by All Sons and Daughters. And we have a free hymn of the month, which is Hallowed Be Your Name from Sovereign Grace Music. Both of those are really awesome. Go check out WeAreWorship.com. You sign up and you get your free song. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's all from me.
And today's We Are Worship Wednesday guest is Jason Houtsma. What's up, Jason?
Hello.
Jason is the face of WorshipArtistry.com, basically.
So you go to the website and his face is just there.
It pops up. It's like a pop-up window.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't tell people that we don't do pop-up windows ever.
Yeah.
We also don't do any clickbait. Girl picks up guitar and you'll never believe what happens next. We are a place of class.
That doesn't work.
It's
a great resource for worship teams, musicians, people who want to learn how to play certain worship songs or just learn how to play the guitar. Jason does all the guitar stuff. There's drums, there's keys, there's bass. So there's just a ton of content there for you to share, not just for yourself, but with your worship team. And I've used it where we're planning on doing a song next week or something, and I'll send the guitarist the link, so they have no excuse to not come prepared to rehearsal. So it's awesome. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to check it out, and we will be giving away free membership, 1-year subscription, so on our website. So it will be exciting. We'll have that next year, in a few weeks. So
crazy.
I asked Jason, what's on your heart? What do you want to talk about? And he said he wants to talk about going beyond the set list, building the people in your ministry. And I thought really a worship leader's job is just coming up with a set list of 4 to 5 songs. Isn't that it?
There's more to it than that. It depends. I guess it depends. Do you go worship leader? Do you go worship pastor? What's the word that you use?
Or lead worshiper.
Yeah. Well, it could be so many things.
Yeah. So maybe start out with your background on how you got involved with worship ministry.
Okay. That's great. I actually I started playing guitar when I was 15 and immediately jumped right into worship stuff. I was very fortunate right off the bat to have my church was very supportive. We had it was me and I don't know if you guys know. Well, I know you guys know John Egan from Desperation Band.
He was on here. Yeah.
Yeah. He started drums the same week I started to play guitar.
Oh, wow.
We were in a room with we had no idea what we were doing. It was just like, all right, come up with a beat. And he was like, dun, 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 dun. And I was like, I got a G chord. But we were very fortunate to be in a church that was very, very happy to nurture us and give us an opportunity to grow. And so I went from doing that, graduated, went to school, did a lot of stuff with music ministry there, ended up graduating and doing sales for a very short time, realizing that was absolutely not my calling. And then was in a professional, quotes, professional worship band for a while. I was kind of doing the label thing for a little bit. And then every time I try and step out of it and back off, there's always kind of it's like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm finished. And then I get pulled right back in. And so 10 years ago, I helped plant a church called Mosaic Church, which is here in Bellingham, Washington. It's not that Mosaic Church, the one that's in California. It's in Washington. It's smaller and not as famous. But I helped plant that just as a volunteer. And then the last year or two, I've been the head worship guy there. I'm the worship pastor there. I use that term. So
Awesome.
And then Worship Artistry came along a couple of years ago and stole all my time. And so I'm just kind of always in the. I always tell people I'm not a guitar player that teaches. I'm a teacher that just happens to be best at guitar. So that's kind of where that's all at.
Cool. Very cool. So, being involved in worship ministry, and when you become a worship leader, you start to realize, there's some more to it than just picking songs every week and sending people, what the song list is. And in my experience, a lot of times, like smaller churches, I feel like challenging a lot of times to find people to join the worship team who have the heart and the talent. So can you kind of start off by sharing with us, like, what do you mean by going beyond the set list?
I think it's, I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, when you first emailed me about doing this, I've had a lot of thoughts percolating, like I'm from Washington, immediately go to the coffee metaphor, but there's just a lot of ideas that are kind of sitting there, and I'm thinking about how I think about worship, because I'm always changing. I wish I could be like, I've come up with this 4-point plan and this is what works for worship. But I think, as we're always learning and we're always growing, we're always kind of learning different stuff. And, one thing that I've noticed with Worship Artistry, we work with thousands of worship leaders, and then just kind of in my own environment and being in different spaces, I jump on blogs and that kind of stuff too, and just kind of read things. And I know, and sometimes I'll be even tempted to comment. And then I realize that really there's a high level piece of people don't agree on what the job of a worship pastor is. And so I feel like if we're going to approach how to build the teams, we have to approach why we're building teams and what the purpose is of that,
Yeah.
I think in a lot of modern, and I can look back to when I first started doing worship music and just how it's swung, how the I hate to call it an industry, but there's an industry for it. There's a culture around it. There's all these things, and the more that we have to focus on creating a good Sunday product. All right. And I know people don't like to use that word, but it's essentially, it's like if all our work is going into the actual set, okay, I have to have, the sound's got to be all squared away. I got to make sure my team has all their technology set up. I got to make sure that all my transitions are smooth, but I got to be done in 20 minutes. And, I got like all these different things that we're trying to do. And so much effort goes into that. We have, it ends up consuming all our time, because that's the thing that a lot of times we're judged by, right? Worship was good today. Worship wasn't good today. The pastor might be happy with what we do or not happy with what we do based on that Sunday. Nobody's like, man, I really like how you developed that kid in high school last week and you guys got together and taught him a few chords. That was like really awesome. That's not where we get our judgment and that sort of stuff. But I think what that does is it ends up sending a message to people that you have to be at this certain level to be a part of what we're doing, right? Because, if we judge it by it's good because, it sounded good, everything flowed together, there's a certain level, which means that, okay, in order for us to do that well, we're going to pick our best players. It's going to be like saying, depending on the size of the church, it's going to be the same 5 or 6 people. All right. And so you're like, well, and then Joe can't make it. Well, we could get Bob to play. Bob's not quite there yet. Let's pick up a track and let's just put that in there instead, and we'll play along with that. And because we're so focused on making that great product. And I would say that in doing that, we kind of neglect the pastor portion of our job, which is to actually develop people, help them grow, and make them better musicians, help them be better worshipers. That not only streams down to the team, but it also streams down to the congregation. And it's an area that I think is, in a sense, getting neglected, and it's something that really needs to become our focus. That's the first part, is just kind of saying, all right, my job at the core of it is to develop people. As a worship pastor, that's what I do. Man, that guy's like really excited.
They love what you're saying.
He says,
It's
"Amen."
a prop party. It's a prop party. Whatever that is, I don't know. So anyway, but that's what I really think in terms of how we develop people. That's the first thing that we have to do. Is we have to recognize that's our job, and then everything from there will bleed out to everything else.
I like that you call yourself a worship pastor rather than a worship leader. I feel like a lot of worship leaders nowadays are calling themselves worship pastors because they want to invest in their team and they want to build those relationships and help develop. And I think that that's important. I'm glad that you talked about that, because I think for me, I've been in a situation where I've been a worship leader and I've been on worship bands, and you really need that worship pastor to invest in you, to help you feel like you're a part of this team and that you can go out and that you can be that, worship pastor for somebody else to help develop others around you. So that's good. I like that.
Well, and and it's for the congregation too. I think so much of what we teach is, it's the method is, we talk about all the time in my church. It's like the method is the message. What you do is the message, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, and it's interesting because in worship environments, there's a lot of, it's funny because so often we're messaging against the method, right? It's like if you've been in church ministry for a long time, how many times have you heard, I just want everybody to know it's not a show. It's not a show. This is worship. It's not a show. It's not a show. It's not a show. It's not a show. And it's like, okay, well, if we're having to work so hard to say, this is what it is, but it's not this, and we're having to message against the method, we're missing out, And I think, when it comes to like congregation, even like teaching your congregation, if we make it so that we say it's not a performance, it's not about you coming and being a consumer and us creating a product, but if we go and we make this perfect thing that we're trying to hand out to the congregation, that method is telling them that this is what worship is. It's this perfect thing. And we're all really kind of messy people. And it's, I don't know. I don't think that's a good, I think that tells people that it's like, you have to be perfect to do this. And it creates a space where it's hard to allow people to even get into being on the worship team. So there's a pastor aspect to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And somebody in the chat said sometimes the senior pastor decides on the name, which is true, or the denomination. I've seen denominations where you can't call yourself a pastor unless you've gone to their seminary and gotten the license and things like that. But even if your church doesn't, officially call you a worship pastor, you can still approach it in that same mindset, because it's not really about the title. Even though that really is a good reminder, it's about how we approach the role, and the calling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's not about necessarily having to have the title. I mean, it's nice for tax purposes, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, how do you normally approach developing your team, whether it's like a high school student that's kind of new to an instrument, and you're helping them? I mean, you're the master, like helping teach people on the instrument side, but also, teaching them about worship, what it means to be on stage. And then to the, 60-year-old lady who wants to sing on the worship team, maybe that you don't feel like it might be a good fit. Like, how do you build that? How do you, navigate that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, with environments, with creating environments that work for individual people. I think if you like, I have, for example, like I used to lead in a church that was like 2,000 people, and there we would have, it was hard because you had your Sunday gatherings, and that was kind of prime time, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you weren't that good, you were in youth group. And then and that was, there was more grace in that scenario. Mm-hmm. And then then you could go all the way down to small groups or kids ministry or that kind of thing. It's
or your closet.
We make it like the adults get the best, and then everybody else gets the other stuff. But I think so much of it is about creating an environment where people can learn and people can be pushed and they feel like they're cared for. I can look at a number one. If I look at my own journey, I can look back when I was in youth group. Like I said, I was around a very encouraging environment, and before you know it, we had a band, and we were encouraged to really take the lead on it. And it was like, all right, we're working on this thing, and I was kind of the band leader, but I didn't sing. And our youth pastor sang, and he would always forget the words, and he'd like not really follow what we were doing. And I was in high school, so naturally I knew the right thing to do. I knew way more than him, right? So I said, hey, why don't we just, everybody knows the songs, like why don't we just not have a lead singer? Let's just have the band, and I'll kind of sing like the first couple words, because I'm confident doing that. I can at least do that, right? And and so he's like, all right, if that's what you want to do. And it was a disaster. I mean, it couldn't have gone more poorly, because without somebody really leading, nobody was paying attention. It was just this nightmare train wreck that lasted for like 20 minutes. And so
is that on YouTube?
No, it is not.
Oh man.
This was long before YouTube, my friend. I didn't know what email was at that time. So
yeah.
My youth pastor sat me down afterwards, and he was like, so how do you feel that went? And I felt like a total idiot. I mean, I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like I had let everybody down. It went poorly. I felt so humbled. It made me so sick to my stomach. I actually stayed home from school the next day.
Oh, wow.
And I just sat there just like praying and just trying to figure it out. Like, what is wrong with me right now? Like, this is thing. And, in that environment, if I didn't have people that were encouraging me and that seemed to care, that cared for me, that like my youth pastor could have just been like, that was trash. Like, what are you doing? But instead he sits down and he's like, how can I help you? You totally messed up. That was a terrible idea. It went totally poorly. Do you want me to come back and sing now? At the same time, I might have totally just quit, but I had that encouragement. And I think the first thing of really developing people is making people, letting people, as a worship leader, as a worship pastor, is to actually just genuinely caring about people. Because if you genuinely care about every person in your community, you'll treat them differently than if they're a commodity that just needs to be good at music, right? And so I think that's kind of one of the first things to look at, is to just say, create an environment where it's safe and people really feel cared for. And you can do that by asking people's opinion, by hanging out with them, like outside of church. There's nothing more discouraging than when you go to one of your, church ministers, and you're like, hey, can we hang out? And they're like, totally. What are you doing at 2:00 in the afternoon on Monday? And you're like, well, I'm working because I have a job. Can we get together at night? That's when I can hang out. I really need to do it during my work hours so I can count it for my work hours,
Yeah.
So I think coming from a place of saying my job as a worship pastor is to come and serve the people on my team and to care about how they're actually doing, and create a space where they can totally fail and feel safe doing that, I think is a big part. And then also kind of find, like, I want to be clear. You don't want to take your, like, you want to bring your best. You want to do something beautiful and creative and wonderful. You want people to feel engaged in worship. You want people to feel like they're really a part of it, and that you're doing something good. Nobody likes playing bad music.
Yeah.
Nobody sits around and goes like, oh man, that sounded terrible. Let's do that again. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be drawing people along and helping them, but I think that there's those places where you can go, hey, come on over to my house. That's the first thing I do when somebody says they want to be in the worship team. I'm like, sweet. Why don't you? Listen, let's Tuesday night. Why don't you come over to my house, and me and you'll just kind of sit and play some music together and just kind of see where you fit. And sometimes that's like, oh man, I think we need to work to the place where you can really play with a band. I don't think you're quite ready to play with a band, but for me, I can go like, check out WorshipArtistry. There's like some really great stuff. You have an account, and you can learn all kinds of stuff, right? but I think but having an environment where you can figure that out without putting them in a really scary spot where it's like, okay, sweet, well, get up on stage and let us all judge you. I think that's a key to really helping people develop.
Yeah, that's good. Good stuff. One of the questions that someone submitted through the chat is, we would like to get our team to the next level, but it's difficult to get people to prepare for the level they are at. How do you motivate them?
Man, that's an interesting question, because I feel like motivation is internal. You know, it comes from somebody showing up and wanting to be there. Like, I'll tell you right now, like at our community, like, I don't chase people to be on the worship team at all. Even if, in fact, there are people that come specifically to our place because they play at other places, and they're like, okay, there's not a they want to rest, right? And so, to me, I've always kind of been on the line of like, if you want to do something, you'll put the energy into doing it. And I can equip you. I can spend time with you, like, if you want to do it. But I feel like I'm not going to chase somebody down to be a part of it. It's like, we do this thing. It's an awesome community expression. There's tons of interaction with our congregation. We kind of have a unique environment, so that it's not like a band thing and a church thing, but it's just kind of a big giant we thing. And so I don't. Yeah, so when it comes to motivation, I feel like you can motivate people by doing excellent things as a group and being something that people want to be a part of. And then just honesty, if it's kind of like, hey, like, how can I help you? Like, there's times when, like, I totally understand that there are people, like, if you're not a professional worship musician, like, you're probably working 50 hours a week. You got family, unless you're trying to balance everything. And then also there's church, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think for those guys, it's not necessarily a matter of motivation. I think it's much more a matter of time and the energy that they have to put in, And so that's why I think that kind of knowing your people and knowing your team and knowing their availability is key to actually being able to. I just don't think motivation is the right word. It's like, if you're not motivated, like, you can't spell victory without try, like that kind of stuff isn't gonna get it done. But I think being sensitive to where people are at, and then trying to equip them in the space that they're in. If it's kind of like, hey, Sally, I know that you are, have your job and you're doing all this stuff, and you really want to work on guitar, but you don't have a ton of time. I would say, like, hey, here's the charts in advance. Let's see if we can get together at my place and see if we can kind of get it to that space. But then also, like, set an example of, like, hey, when we show up, when practices, we show up on time. That's what we do. Like, there's certain things that you put in place and that create the culture that you're in. And so I think if you create a good culture, you call people into that, and then they're either going to be motivated to be a part of it or they're not going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good answer. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, in a way, it's a little bit similar to, like, if somebody's trying to get fit or healthy or lose weight, and they join, like, a exercise program at the local gym where there's, like, a trainer. They have standards, they expect you to come on time. They expect you to give 100%. But they can't make you come there, like, they can't make you be motivated. You have to be motivated to actually get there. And so in that way, I think it's similar. What are your thoughts, Morgan?
Yeah, I agree with that. Being a worship leader and having to, I wouldn't want to say, like, expect people to show up on time, or, like, just, I try to encourage them, like, hey, we're going to get together this time, like, come to practice, check out these songs, and encourage them. And a lot of the times they'll encourage me as well. So it's kind of like, as a team, we're motivating each other. So I can understand where you're coming from as far as, like, when you work together, you're all motivated to make a greater sound, or, to have a better worship experience for your congregation or whatnot. So I don't know. I feel you on that one.
And somebody else submitted a question kind of related to this. How do you feel about paid musicians on the worship team?
It's interesting. Part of the reason why I stepped out of worship ministry for a while was because I wanted to I wanted to not have a paycheck for it. Because, when I was in college, I went to college in Oklahoma, and there's tons of big churches, and they all pay their musicians because it's like, got to have the best, it's like, this is what the expectation is. I feel like that leads to a more consumer mindset, but it is what it is. Right. So, and I went and I played at a church, and I'll tell you, like, I wasn't part of that church. I just came in and played. I didn't bring my heart to it. Like, I did other things, and I came and was like, all right, this is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm doing my best at it, but it was like, my heart wasn't in it. I'd personally rather have, not great worship, or not great. I shouldn't say that. That's not what I meant. Not great worship. Not great. No, I hate that. Not great music. All right. I'd rather have the music be subpar and be involving the people that everybody loves in the community than just bringing in like a hired gun to play. That's my own personal preference. At the same time, I get paid a little bit to be the worship pastor at my church. It's a part-time thing. I'm in worship artistry. And then I was doing it volunteer. And then finally it was like, if I have to be responsible and I can never leave, like, I need something to just kind of like help me a little bit here. Because at the time when it started, I was working for Worship Artistry for like 40 hours a week for free, and then teaching lessons, and then also basically working at the church for free. So it's kind of to make all those like, it was like, all right, I need to create some balance in my life. But it's not about first being there to play. It's about having the responsibility to run everything. To me, it's like, it's one thing to run everything. It's logistics. It's I show up before everybody gets there, and I set up the whole sound system, because we have a venue. We don't have like a church that's always there. So it's like, I show up every week, have everything set up, so when my worship musicians show up, they can just plug in and go, and they don't have to like be a part of it, and they can just have the fun part. I make sure that everything's set up. And at the end of the day, if all my team, this is where some of this came from, is like summertime rolls around and you're like, all right, so here's the team for this week. And everyone's like, I'm not here. Yeah. Like, literally everyone's like not here. So it's either we don't have music, or like, as the worship pastor, I can just get like, I'm confident just leading by myself. I'll just walk up with my acoustic guitar and be like, all right, hey, everybody, like, no band this week, just me. Yeah. I really want to hear everybody sing. Let's go, So in terms of like paying musicians because you just want to have quality, if that's what you want to do, like, I'm not going to knock it, but I can say for myself, I don't think you're going to get near as much engagement, and I don't think you get as much engagement from the community, because once again, the method is the message. If the method is, well, let's just pay some people to play some songs for us so we can all sing along and have a good experience. Yeah. I'm like, God, it feels like it's missing a big community element to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a full-time worship pastor, part-time worship pastor. Now I'm a volunteer on the worship team, and I lead once in a while. But in any of those situations, I've never paid a musician to play, except for like guest musicians. If I had a drummer back out last minute and I had to ask somebody to fill in that was a part of a different church, I would pay that person a little bit to just compensate them and show appreciation, for being there, even though it's not their local congregation they're a part of. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think it's definitely a discussion that you should have with your senior, pastor or your pastoral team, and get their thoughts on it, and make sure that everybody's on the same page with that,
Yeah. I want to be clear too. Like, I understand that there's all very different cultural expectations. There's a whole lot of things going on, but I do think that the question that we have to always be asking ourselves as people who lead people, you have to ask the question, why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times we get caught up in like, well, this is what we do. And we don't step back and go, well, why do we do that? And so I think it's, it's an opportunity. If that's something that's I think we're like, as worship musicians, as worship pastors, worship leaders, we do submit to the senior pastor, but I think it's also a great conversation to ask, like, okay, if you want why do we do this? You ever ask yourself, why do we sing in church? It's like, well, because we do. It's like, well, no, like, let's ask that question, why? And then in the way that we sing in church, how does that meet that reason of why we do that?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, man, our time flew by. So
felt like really quick.
We're gonna have to bring you back and to address the 100 questions that people submitted.
I know there's so many.
But if you're new to We Are Worship Wednesday, we do this every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central here on Blab. So feel free to subscribe to upcoming Blabs and subscribe to our Blab channel, and you'll be able to see the upcoming scheduled Blabs. Next week, we're going to have two church drummers that are going to talk about what it means to be a worship drummer, a drummer on the worship team. One is Mike Murray, and who's actually our coworker, Morgan and I's coworker. And the other guest will be Josh Altop from Gateway Church in Dallas. So they both have some really great insights and a lot of experience with that. So whether you're a worship leader or a drummer, I want to encourage you to join us. And I just want to address some of the comments from the chat. We do, talk about practical things some weeks, and then we talk about the spiritual aspect some weeks. So we're trying to, really be a resource and something that you can, listen to and gain a lot of just practical and spiritual insight from. So join us every week, and you'll be able to, cover a lot of different topics. So.
Hey, real quick. I'm seeing like a lot of comments over in this section. And so if you want to keep discussing this, one of the things we can do over at Worship Artistry, I can open up a green room post that'll just have a chance to keep the comment discussion going. So I'd love to hear what people think. Like I said earlier, I'm not like, oh, I figured everything out. And if you just follow my 5-step plan, I love to discuss things. So worshipartistry.com/green room, and I'll put a post up there. I'll make it real clear, and you guys should jump in too. I'll just keep chatting. Cool. The only thing I ask is for everybody to be respectful of each other. We have created a killer community over there of people who are all like there to help each other out. And so, think about it from the perspective of, if somebody was sitting across from a table from you, would you say that to them? Yes or no? So head on over there. That'd be a great time.
Yeah. Awesome. That'd be great for you to do that. And you have some really funny blog posts on your website. So yeah, it's a great
10 ways to be the worst worship musician, I think, is like one of our biggest things.
Love it.
Well, let me get the web address here on the chat here.
Cool. Yeah, and also we can also share again, WeAreWorship.com. If you head over there, you'll find a free song every week and a free hymn every month, which includes MP3s and chord charts.